The rain hammered against the windows of Murphy's Diner on Route 66, somewhere between Flagstaff and Albuquerque. Sarah Chun wiped down the same table for the third time, her hands trembling slightly as she glanced at the clock. 6:47 p.m. Her daughter Emma would be getting out of basketball practice in 13 minutes, and the babysitter charged extra for every minute past 7. She was 29 but felt 40. 3 years as a single mother had carved lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't hide anymore. Her black hair, pulled back in a ponytail, showed gray strands she didn't have time to cover. The white uniform with Murphy's logo embroidered on the chest pocket was spotless, though Sarah made sure of that. It was the only thing she could control. The dinner rush had just begun. Truck drivers, families on road trips, and locals filled the red vinyl booths. The smell of coffee and bacon grease hung thick in the air. Sarah moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her smile automatic, her notepad ready. Emma sat in the corner booth near the kitchen, the one Sarah always reserved for her when the babysitter fell through. It happened more often than she'd like. The 8-year-old had her math homework spread across the table, her small face scrunched in concentration. She wore her school uniform, a blue polo shirt with a small stain on the collar that Sarah hadn't been able to get out. The diner had been Sarah's lifeline since David left. No explanation, just gone one Tuesday morning while she was dropping Emma at school. He cleaned out their savings account and left a note on the kitchen counter that said he needed to find himself. She found herself 2 jobs and a mountain of debt instead. Melissa Bradford stood behind the counter, arms crossed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the laminate. She was the evening manager, 23 years old, with her father's last name on the deed to the diner. Her blonde hair was styled in beach waves that must have taken an hour, and her makeup looked professionally done. She never wore the standard uniform, always something fashionable that skirted the dress code. "Sarah, can I talk to you for a second?" Melissa's voice cut through the dinner noise. Sarah finished pouring coffee for table 7 and walked over, her heart already sinking. Melissa only used that tone when something was wrong. "Is there a problem?" Melissa glanced at Emma, then back at Sarah with an expression that tried to be sympathetic but came across as condescending. "Look, I know things are tough for you right now, but we've talked about this. The diner isn't a daycare. She's doing homework. She's not bothering anyone. That's not the point." Melissa lowered her voice, though not enough. Several customers glanced their way. "We have an image to maintain. You're making customers uncomfortable having your kid here while you work. It looks unprofessional." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. Emma is quiet. She sits in that corner and does her schoolwork. Nobody has complained. "I'm complaining." Melissa's voice grew sharper. "This is a business, Sarah. You need to figure out your childcare situation or we're going to have to reconsider your position here." The words hung in the air like a slap. Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. She needed this job. The apartment rent was already 2 weeks late. Emma needed new shoes, and the electricity bill was sitting on the counter at home with a final notice stamp. "I understand." Sarah forced the words out. "It won't happen again." "Good." Melissa smiled, already turning away to greet a couple who had just walked in. "Table 4 needs their check, by the way." Sarah walked back to the coffee station, her hands shaking as she grabbed the pot. She could feel eyes on her, could hear the whispers. The older woman in booth 3 leaned over to her husband, saying something behind her hand. The businessman at the counter suddenly found his phone very interesting. At the corner booth, Emma looked up from her homework. She had heard everything. Her dark eyes, so much like Sarah's, were shiny with unshed tears. "Mom, I can wait outside." "No, baby." Sarah crouched beside the booth, touching her daughter's hand. "You stay right here and finish your homework. Everything's fine." But she said, "Don't worry about what she said." Sarah tried to smile. "We're okay." She wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. But Emma didn't need to know that. Sarah stood, grabbed her notepad, and headed to table 4 with their check, trying to ignore the sympathetic looks and the judgment in equal measure. The bell above the door chimed. 6 men walked in, their leather vests marking them immediately. Hell's Angels. The patches, the boots, the presence that made the diner go quiet. They headed for the large corner booth opposite Emma. Sarah took a breath and walked over, notepad ready, wondering what else this shift could throw at her. The 6 men settled into the booth with the kind of ease that came from years on the road together. Their leather vests bore the distinctive winged skull patch, worn and weathered from countless miles. The oldest among them, a man with a silver beard braided down his chest, seemed to be their leader. His vest had more patches than the others, each one telling a story Sarah couldn't read. Sarah approached their table, her professional smile fixed in place despite her racing heart. "Evening, gentlemen. What can I get you?" The bearded man looked up, and his eyes were surprisingly kind. "Coffee all around to start, sweetheart. We'll need a minute with the menus." "No problem." Sarah poured their coffee, noticing how they thanked her each time, how they moved their cups closer to make her job easier. Small gestures, but after Melissa's public humiliation, they felt like kindness. She returned to her other tables, refilling drinks, taking orders, clearing plates. But she could feel Melissa watching her, tracking her every move. The manager stood near the register, whispering to Katie, the other waitress, both of them glancing at Emma's corner booth. Sarah delivered a burger to table 6 when she heard Melissa's voice again, louder this time, projecting across the diner. "Sarah, a word. Now." Sarah's stomach dropped. She set down the plate and walked to the counter, aware that every conversation in the diner had paused. The Hells Angels had stopped talking. Even the cook had poked his head through the kitchen window. Melissa stood with her hands on her hips, her face flushed with what looked like righteous anger but felt like cruelty. "I thought we just had this conversation. Your daughter is still here. I don't have anyone to pick her up until 8. Sarah kept her voice low, pleading. "Please, Melissa. Just tonight. I promise I'll figure something out by tomorrow." "That's what you said last week. And the week before." Melissa shook her head, her voice dripping with disdain. "Honestly, Sarah, if you can't handle your personal life, maybe you shouldn't be working here. Some of us manage to get our lives together before having kids." The words struck like a physical blow. Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes, felt the weight of 3 years of struggle, of every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every choice between paying for groceries or keeping the lights on. "I'm doing my best." "Well, your best isn't good enough." Melissa gestured toward Emma. "Look at her. She's taking up a booth during dinner rush. That's lost revenue. And frankly, having a kid sitting there while her mother works makes this place look cheap. Like we hire people who can't afford proper childcare." The diner had gone completely silent. Sarah could feel every eye on her, could sense the judgment, the pity, the uncomfortable shuffling of people who didn't want to witness this but couldn't look away. From the corner, Emma had gone very still. Her homework sat forgotten on the table. Her small hands were clenched in her lap, her face burning red with shame that no 8-year-old should have to feel. "Melissa, please." Sarah's voice broke. "Don't do this. I'm not doing anything. You did this to yourself." Melissa's voice rang out across the diner. "You want to keep this job? Your kid goes. Now, call someone, have her wait outside, I don't care. But she's not sitting in my diner taking up space during dinner service. It's 40 degrees outside and raining. Then you should have planned better." Melissa crossed her arms. "You have 5 minutes to figure it out or you're both leaving." Permanently. Sarah stood frozen, her mind racing through impossible options. The babysitter wouldn't come early. Her sister lived 3 states away. She had no friends left after David drained their social circle along with the bank account. Emma couldn't wait outside in the cold rain. But if Sarah lost this job, they'd lose everything. "Mom." Emma's small voice cut through the silence. She had stood up, gathering her books with shaking hands. "I'll go. It's okay." "No, baby, you won't." Sarah moved toward her daughter, but Melissa stepped in her path. 5 minutes, Sarah. I'm not running a charity here." The businessman at the counter cleared his throat uncomfortably. The family in booth 3 suddenly found their meals very interesting. The older couple who had whispered earlier stared at their plates. Nobody said anything. Nobody did anything. Except the man with the silver beard. He stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sound seemed loud in the oppressive quiet. His brothers remained seated, but their attention was fixed, alert. He walked to the counter with deliberate steps, each boot heel clicking against the tile. When he reached Melissa, he looked down at her from his considerable height. His voice was quiet, controlled, but it carried to every corner of the diner. "Ma'am, I think you and I need to have a conversation about hospitality." Melissa looked up at the bearded man, her confident expression faltering for just a moment before she recovered. "I don't know what you think you heard, but this is a private employee matter. Nothing's private when you're shouting it across a diner, lady." He placed both hands on the counter, leaning forward slightly. His voice remained calm, almost conversational. "Name's Robert. My brothers and I have been riding through here for 15 years. Always stop at Murphy's. Good food, decent coffee, used to have decent people too." Melissa's jaw tightened. "Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to sit down or leave." "In a minute." Robert glanced back at Sarah, who stood frozen near Emma's booth, her daughter now beside her with her backpack on. He turned back to Melissa. "See, what I just witnessed was a grown woman humiliating a working mother in front of her kid and a room full of strangers. Over what? A little girl doing homework in the corner? She's violating company policy." "Company policy." Robert nodded slowly. "Your daddy's company, right? Saw his picture on the wall when we came in. Big spread in the local paper about how Murphy's is a family establishment. Community values and all that." "That's right." Melissa lifted her chin. "And part of maintaining those values is professional standards." "Professional standards." Robert looked around the diner. "Let me tell you what I see. I see a single mother working her tail off to provide for her kid. Probably pulling double shifts, judging by how tired she looks. I see a little girl sitting quietly in a corner, not bothering a soul, trying to do her homework while her mom works. And I see you, making a spectacle out of her struggle because it doesn't fit your idea of what this place should look like." One of the other bikers, a muscular man with a gray ponytail, stood and walked over. "Marcus." He extended his hand to Sarah. "Don't mind Robert. He gets preachy. But he's right." The other 4 men stood as well, creating a wall of leather and solidarity near the counter. They didn't move aggressively or speak threateningly. They simply stood there, present and united. Melissa's face had gone pale, then red. "You can't intimidate me. I'll call the police." "Call them." Robert pulled out his phone and set it on the counter. "Tell them 6 customers are concerned about how you're treating your staff. While you're at it, might want to mention we've been recording this whole conversation. Videos already uploaded to our club's social media. 40,000 followers and counting." Melissa grabbed for the phone, but Robert was faster, pocketing it smoothly. "That would be assault, ma'am. Wouldn't recommend it." Sarah found her voice, though it came out shaky. "Please, this isn't necessary. I don't want trouble." "You're not causing trouble, sweetheart." Marcus smiled at her gently. "We just don't like bullies. Been dealing with them our whole lives. Got pretty good at spotting them." Robert turned back to Melissa. "Here's what's going to happen. This young lady is going to finish her shift with her daughter sitting right there in that booth. Nobody's going to say another word about it. And tomorrow you're going to apologize to both of them." Melissa's hands were shaking now, whether from anger or fear. Sarah couldn't tell. "You can't tell me how to run my diner." "You're right, but I can tell 40,000 people how you run it." Robert's voice hardened just slightly. "And I can make sure every biker between here and the Canadian border knows that Murphy's Diner doesn't respect working mothers. See how that affects your bottom line." The cook, an older Hispanic man named Luis, emerged from the kitchen. He'd been listening the whole time. "Melissa, maybe you should take a break. Go call your father." "I don't need to call my father." But her voice lacked conviction now. "If you're rooting for Sarah right now, if you believe in standing up for people who are just trying to survive, take a moment and subscribe to the channel. Because this story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming." Robert straightened up, pulling out his wallet. "We'd like to order now. 6 of the biggest steaks you got, all the sides. And whatever Sarah and her daughter want on our tab." He pulled out $200 bills and placed them on the counter. This should cover it and leave a generous tip for the excellent service. Sarah shook her head, tears now flowing freely. I can't accept that. You're not accepting charity. You're accepting payment for dealing with more in one shift than most people handle in a month. Marcus guided her gently back toward the tables. Now, take our order and let us feed you and your girl properly. Emma tugged on Sarah's sleeve. Mom, who are these people? Angels, baby. Sarah wiped her eyes, a genuine smile breaking through for the first time that evening. They're angels. Sarah took their orders with shaking hands, Emma beside her holding the notepad like she was part of the team. The bikers ordered with exaggerated politeness, asking Emma questions about school and basketball that made her shyness melt away. Marcus showed her pictures of his own daughter on his phone, a girl about Emma's age with braces and a soccer trophy. Melissa had retreated to the office, the door closed. Through the window, Sarah could see her on the phone, pacing. Katie, the other waitress, came over and squeezed Sarah's shoulder. Been wanting to say something for months. Katie whispered. She treats everyone like dirt, but you got it worst. I'm glad someone finally stood up. The diner's atmosphere had shifted entirely. The family in booth 3 called Sarah over and ordered dessert they probably didn't want, leaving a $20 tip on a $30 check. The businessman at the counter did the same. The older couple who had whispered earlier apologized directly to Sarah, the wife's eyes wet with tears. We should have said something. The woman touched Sarah's hand. I'm sorry we didn't. Over the next hour, something remarkable happened. Robert and his brothers became the unofficial hosts of Murphy's Diner. When new customers came in looking uncomfortable at the sight of the bikers, Robert would greet them warmly, recommend menu items, and tell them about the excellent service. The tension dissolved into something warmer, more communal. Luis came out of the kitchen with 2 perfect steaks, cooked exactly as requested. He set them down in front of Robert and Marcus, then leaned down to whisper something Sarah couldn't hear. Robert nodded and shook his hand. Emma sat in the corner booth, her homework forgotten, watching everything with wide eyes. A biker named Tommy, covered in tattoos of roses and skulls, sat across from her and helped her with her math problems, explaining fractions using pieces of pie from the dessert case. Your mom's pretty amazing, you know, Tommy told Emma as Sarah passed by with coffee refills. Takes a lot of strength to do what she does. She works really hard. Emma said quietly. Sometimes she cries in the bathroom when she thinks I'm asleep. Sarah's heart broke hearing that. She hadn't realized Emma knew. Around 8 o'clock, a man in an expensive suit entered the diner. He was in his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of presence that came from decades of authority. The room went quiet again as he walked straight to the office and opened the door without knocking. That's Melissa's father. Katie whispered. This is about to get interesting. 10 minutes later, Melissa emerged, her face blotchy and tear-stained. Behind her, Mr. Bradford looked tired and disappointed. He surveyed the diner, his eyes landing on Sarah, then on Emma, then on the 6 bikers who had created this entire situation. He walked to their booth. I'm Richard Bradford. I own this establishment. I understand there was an incident this evening. Robert stood, extending his hand. Your daughter saw fit to humiliate one of your best employees in front of the whole diner. We felt compelled to intervene. Richard shook his hand, then looked at Sarah. Miss Chen, could you come here, please? Sarah approached, her heart hammering. This was it. She was going to lose her job anyway, and now she'd caused a scene that would follow her to every diner in town. I owe you an apology. Richard's words shocked her into silence. I've been an absentee owner, letting my daughter run things while I focused on other ventures. That was a mistake. What happened tonight never should have happened. Mr. Bradford, I just need this job. Sarah's voice was small. Please don't fire me. Fire you? Richard looked genuinely confused. Miss Chun, I'm promoting you. Effective immediately, you're the new evening manager. Melissa will be working under your supervision until she learns what hospitality actually means. If she can't handle that, she can find employment elsewhere. The diner erupted in applause. Emma jumped up from her booth and ran to her mother, wrapping her arms around her waist. Sarah stood there, unable to process what had just happened. "There's more," Richard continued. "I'm implementing a new policy. Any employee who needs to bring their child to work due to childcare issues can do so, provided the child has a designated area and doesn't interfere with operations. We're a family diner. This time we acted like it." Melissa stood by the office door, her face unreadable. For a moment, Sarah thought she saw something like shame flash across her features. Robert clapped Richard on the shoulder. "Now that's what we like to see. Second chances and common sense. You're a good man, Mr. Bradford." Richard Bradford pulled out a chair at the counter and sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. He ordered coffee from Sarah, who still moved in a daze, unable to fully grasp that her life had just changed in the span of 2 hours. Luis brought out the steaks for the remaining bikers, along with plates piled high with sides. The smell of perfectly seasoned meat and garlic mashed potatoes filled the air. He made a special plate for Emma, smaller portions of everything, and winked at her as he set it down. "On the house, Pequena. You've had a big night." Richard turned to Sarah as she poured his coffee. "How long have you been working here, Miss Chun?" 3 years, sir. Since my husband left." Sarah's hand was steady now, the initial shock fading into something that felt like cautious hope. "And in those 3 years, have you ever called in sick?" Sarah thought about it. "Twice. Once when Emma had the flu and I couldn't find anyone to watch her. Once when I had pneumonia and physically couldn't stand up." "Did you try to come in anyway with pneumonia?" "Yes, sir. Luis sent me home." Richard shook his head. 3 years. Perfect attendance except for 2 days. "Luis tells me you're always early, never leave until closing is done right, and cover shifts for other people constantly." "Why didn't I know about you?" "You were busy, Mr. Bradford," Sarah said simply, "and Melissa never mentioned it." Melissa never mentioned a lot of things, apparently. Richard glanced at his daughter, who now sat in a booth by herself, staring at her phone. "Several of your co-workers have already texted me tonight. Katie says you've been training new staff without extra pay. Luis says you've been doing manager duties for months while Melissa took credit. I just did what needed doing. That's exactly why you're management material." Richard pulled out his wallet and handed her a business card. "This has my direct number. You call me if you need anything. Childcare issues, scheduling problems, supplies, anything. I should have been more present. That changes now." Emma had finished half her steak and was now showing Tommy her math homework, proud of the problems she'd solved. The biker examined it seriously, nodding with approval. "Perfect score. You're going to be an engineer someday, kid. I can tell." "What's an engineer?" Emma asked. "Someone who builds amazing things." Tommy smiled. "Someone who figures out problems nobody else can solve. Kind of like what your mom did tonight." "My mom didn't do anything." Emma looked confused. "Those men did." "No, Pequena." Luis had come out of the kitchen again, wiping his hands on his apron. "Your mom has been fighting every single day for 3 years. She never gave up, never stopped trying, never let anyone break her. That's the hardest kind of strength there is. These men just made sure everyone else saw what we've seen all along." Robert stood and walked over to Sarah, who was refilling coffee for table 7. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why didn't you fight back? When that girl was tearing you down, why didn't you defend yourself?" Sarah looked over at Emma, who was laughing at something Marcus was saying. "Because I couldn't risk losing this job. Emma needs stability. She needs food and a roof over her head. My pride isn't worth her security." Robert nodded slowly. "That's the difference between people who talk about being strong and people who actually are strong. Real strength is knowing when to swallow your pride for something more important." He went back to his booth, where his brothers were finishing their meals. They talked quietly among themselves, occasionally glancing at Sarah and Emma. When they were done, Robert called Sarah over one more time. "We ride through here every few months," he said. "Mind if we make this our regular stop? Like to check in, make sure everything's going okay." "You don't have to do that. We want to," Marcus added. "Besides, Luis promised to name a burger after us. Can't miss that." It's going to be called the Guardian Angel Burger. Luis shouted from the kitchen. Extra everything, just like you guys. The bikers paid their bill, leaving a tip that made Sarah's eyes water. As they prepared to leave, each one stopped to say goodbye to Emma, giving her high fives and words of encouragement. Tommy gave her his card. You ever need help with math homework, you have your mom call that number. My daughter's a tutor. She does video calls. Richard walked them to the door, shaking each of their hands. Thank you for caring enough to speak up. Not many people would. We're not as scary as we look. Robert grinned. Most of the time. 18 months later, Murphy's Diner looked different. The vinyl booths had been reupholstered in deep burgundy. The walls repainted a warm cream color. New photos hung in frames showing staff and regular customers. One photo, prominently displayed near the register, showed 6 bikers standing with Sarah and Emma on the day Richard had promoted her. Sarah stood behind the counter, reviewing the schedule for the upcoming week. Her hair was shorter now, styled professionally, with fewer gray strands showing. She wore a crisp white blouse with a manager's name tag. The lines around her eyes were still there, but they crinkled differently now, more from smiling than from worry. Emma, now 10 years old and several inches taller, sat at the corner booth doing homework. But this time it was by choice, not necessity. She came by after school most days, not because Sarah couldn't afford childcare, but because she liked being there. She knew every regular customer by name, helped Luis prep vegetables when her homework was done, and had become something of a mascot for the place. The bell above the door chimed, and 6 familiar figures walked in. Robert's beard was more silver than gray now, and Marcus had cut his ponytail, but they were unmistakable. Emma jumped up and ran to hug Tommy, who had indeed helped her with math homework over video calls for the past year and a half. There's my favorite mathematician. Tommy lifted her off the ground in a bear hug. How's 5th grade treating you? Easy. Emma grinned. My teacher says I might skip a grade in math. That's my girl. Sarah came around the counter to greet them properly. Right on schedule. I was wondering if you'd make it this trip. Wouldn't miss it. Robert looked around the diner with approval. Place looks great, Sarah. Really great. Richard did most of it. Sarah gestured to the renovations. Said if I was going to manage the place, it should look like somewhere people wanted to be managed. And business? Marcus asked as they settled into their usual booth. Up 40% from last year. Sarah poured their coffee without asking, knowing their orders by heart. We hired 3 new people, including a single dad who brings his son in on weekends. Richard implemented the family policy at all 5 of his restaurants. Said it was the best business decision he ever made. How's Melissa? Robert asked carefully. Actually working. Sarah smiled without malice. She works the morning shift under supervision. Richard made her start from the bottom, waiting tables, learning what it's really like. She apologized to me about 6 months ago. A real apology, not a corporate one. I think she finally got it. People can change. Robert nodded approvingly. Not everyone does, but some do. Luis came out of the kitchen carrying a huge burger on a platter. The Guardian Angel Burger, gentlemen. Now with bacon-wrapped jalapenos, because Marcus complained last time that it wasn't spicy enough. The burger had become a real menu item, and it was one of their best sellers. Part of the proceeds went to a local fund Sarah had established, helping single parents with emergency childcare costs. Richard matched every dollar raised. Katie, who was now assistant manager, brought out a cake with candles. The whole staff gathered around, along with regular customers who had become friends. What's this? Sarah looked confused. 18 months since the best night this place ever had. Luis grinned. We celebrate that now. The night Murphy's Diner remembered what it was supposed to be about. They sang, not quite in tune, and Sarah cried happy tears while Emma squeezed her hand. When they cut the cake, Robert raised his coffee cup in a toast. To speaking up when it matters. To defending people who can't defend themselves. And to second chances for everyone who deserves them. The diner erupted in agreement, cups and glasses raised. Later, as the bikers prepared to leave, Emma gave each of them a drawing she'd made. 6 angels with leather vests and motorcycles, protecting a mother and daughter under starry skies. You're an artist now too? Tommy examined his drawing with genuine admiration. This is going on my fridge at home. Sarah walked them to the door. Thank you for everything, for changing my life. You changed your own life, sweetheart. Robert hugged her. You were already strong. We just made sure people saw it. As the motorcycles roared to life in the parking lot, Sarah stood in the doorway with Emma beside her, watching them disappear into the desert sunset. If the story touched your heart, if you believe in standing up for what's right and giving people the dignity they deserve, do me a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what you thought, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share your own stories of unexpected kindness in the comments. I read every single one, and your stories inspire the next videos I create. What kind of story do you want to hear next? Let me know below. Thank you so much for watching until the end. You're the reason these stories matter. Until next time, remember that sometimes the people who look the toughest have the biggest hearts, and kindness always wins in the end. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.